Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. In fact, it's quite early in the day. It's 3:09 a.m. on November 4th, and the issue that has me up so late in the night or early in the morning, depending on your perspective, is because of the election. Seeing the results from November 2nd, seeing what's playing out in this nation. And it's not the kind of perspective and the kind of realization that you may see in the major mainstream media. It's not the message that you're going to hear from most Republicans either. It's the fact that the fight for America, the true soul of America, the direction that this nation is going to be going in, is actually just beginning. This is only the start. And we do want to highlight some of the things we're talking about and why we think that. But before we get started, we do want to mention, if this is the first time that you are joining us, we want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream. We go on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to be able to reach out to you, to get your text, your calls, your comments, your voice from anywhere in the world. Because no matter what your government may think, no matter what the internet overlords think, you have an undeniable right to free speech. And we want you to celebrate that with us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. We thank you, and we're going to get into the story now. So let's look at this, because I think there's a perspective here that really hasn't been addressed. I mean, when we look at elections year after year after year, there's something that tends to happen. For political junkies, people like myself, political commentators, we know there is an ebb and flow to the attention that the public puts on any of the elections and any of the issues from an election. We just hit the spike. The peak was on November 2nd. And instantly, as soon as people cast their vote, their awareness of the policies, the issues, who's in charge, everything plummets. It drops like it fell off of a cliff, like it fell off the Grand Canyon. And then we see changes in our government, not necessarily the changes people expect to see. We see that the party that lost starts making changes. They start making adaptations. They change the way they do their messaging. Not necessarily that they're changing the policies that the country is facing. It's not that they come up with more solutions to the issues that are facing us. Because the public has stopped paying attention, it gives them time to go through, do an analysis, and then come back with a more soundbite friendly, ad-friendly kind of concept. And that's when we start seeing new 30-second ads as we get into the next year. So you're going to see in February of 2020 and going into the spring and summer, there's going to be a new approach. There's going to be a new message coming out of the White House and from Democrats. And I think we already know what it's going to be because we were told what it is. We were given the message from New York City. And they told us what the Democrats are going to do going forward. But I want you to understand, there's a lot that we're still fighting for. And there's a reason why we need to stay on top of this. Let me get into what I'm talking about here so you can see what I mean. So first, I want to go to, just as looking back, just on October 27th, last week, we knew that two things happened. One, in New York City, we saw what is the result of the push for the intersectionality, gender identity politics, the critical race theory that has been a deluge into every aspect of our lives. It's part of our entertainment, it's part of our sports, it's on the news 24/7. This progressive movement that we've seen in America and has been exported to the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, Canada, much to the derision of the people in those countries. So we saw that in an attack that happened on a New York subway train. Something that caught a lot of attention and may have affected, to some extent, the election that we saw. But at the same time, we also found out on October 27th, as we brought up on this show, we did the timeline. We know that the Biden administration is actively lying, not misconstrued, not misunderstanding. They are abjectly lying to the American people. They told us on September 1st, well, actually, they told us in June that the Biden administration would not leave Americans behind, that they would get everyone out of Afghanistan. That story changed on August 18th when General Milley started telling us that the Americans who want to leave the terrorist organization of the Taliban and ISIS and Al-Qaeda would be taken out of the country before the American military left. Then on September 1st, we were told that between 100 to 200 Americans were left behind, that they were purposefully and under the direction of the Biden administration were actively discarded, left to fend for themselves for the most part in Afghanistan. And we were told it's only 100 to 200 Americans, even though we had been told previously that there were 10 to 15,000 Americans, and we only got 5,500 out of the country. And we found out over time, and on October 27th, we were told, nope, it's 415 at least, because on October 26th, we were told it's 450 from the very same Biden administration that told us, nope, it's 85. They have been lying. They're playing with the numbers. They've been waiting for you to forget what's going on so you wouldn't pay attention anymore. And that's kind of troubling. On October 28th, just last week, we see that, again, this is coming from factcheck.org, that Joe Biden and the Biden administration were spinning facts on his economic framework, on the American Families Plan, on our economy, making up stories like the plan is paid for, which it is not, telling us that there's no pollution that comes from electric vehicles, which is untrue, telling us that telling us about childcare and all of the social issues that aren't necessarily part of the economic issues that America is facing at this time. But again, it's a confirmation that Joe Biden, he isn't misspeaking. He isn't misstating some of the facts. He's outright lying to the American people, and he expects you're not going to pay attention to it, especially after the election. We know that when we were looking back last week, Black Lives Matter is such a negative concept that many of the mayors, many Democratic mayors, took a new position. They have reversed their roles, not necessarily because their politics changed, but because they needed to get votes in this election. And so they decided, in the face of the fact that in defunding the police, they completely failed. And everyone has recognized that crime has gone up as a direct consequence of defunding the police or reimagining the police or reallocating police funding, which has resulted in the same thing in every single case: less police officers, which meant higher crime. And in some states, like New York State, where we had bail reform, which allowed criminals to be released back into the public immediately, literally without any bail, just in and walking right back out of the police station. And in many cases, we have seen that these individuals immediately, same day, sometimes within an hour, committing the same or more crimes and having this process continue over and over again. In some cases, we've seen individuals arrested and released and rearrested 4 times in a row. So the politics that we saw was that at the very last minute, many of the Democratic mayors in Seattle and Cleveland, they started to take a new tact. Said, no, We have to look at this from a new approach, including in New York City. We need a new approach. Being progressive is a good thing, and we need to have progressive politics, but we need to have a different approach about that. We have to take it in a new and different way. And this is the politics that we're going to be seeing going forward. Because the election didn't win America. We haven't saved America from critical race theory. We haven't saved Americans' economy from the new taxes and the spending from the Biden administration and the Democratic majority. We haven't saved America yet. We haven't even gotten our Americans in Afghanistan back home yet. There isn't even a plan to get them home yet, nor to address the Afghans, the Afghan refugees who are unvetted, 52,000 of them in the United States at this moment. We still haven't figured out a plan about how they are going to be distributed, but we do know, as we have reported on this program, that so far, everywhere they have been released, in the 4 states that these 52,000 Afghan citizens have been released to, every state, there is a sexual assault on women and minors. So we have a concern, and yet we have no plan. As we have covered on this program, nobody in government at the federal or state level know anything about this. That didn't change on November 2nd. We still need to pressure all of these politicians about these issues and to make sure that they're going to pay attention to what's going on, that they're going to answer and they're going to tell us what are their plans going forward, because they haven't done it yet. We have to keep the pressure up. We have to stay on them about this. But it's not the only thing. And when people say, well, Mike, you just don't understand. Biden is just mistaking things. And he saw the election. He saw the results that came out. The Democrats took sweeping losses. They're not going to go forward and do this again. They're going to change. They're going to become more moderate. They're going to go to the middle ground. That's the message that you're going to hear from CNN and MSNBC. You're going to hear that from a lot of talking heads and many of the political commentators. And I'm going to tell you, that's not true. That's not going to happen. In fact, what we're going to see is more of exactly what we have been seeing. You see, you may have heard, and we covered it on this program, that Joe Biden announced over the weekend a leak from the White House stating that Joe Biden, his administration, was looking to pay $450,000 to illegal aliens in the United States as a retribution, as a payback for the punishment, the terrible treatment they received when Donald Trump followed the law, the same law that President Obama was restricted on, that required that parents and children had to be separated. It's a 1997 law. The Obama administration tried to reverse that law in 2015, and they lost. President Trump followed that law. And now Joe Biden wants to pay $450,000 per illegal alien because of that, because Donald Trump followed the law. Well, actually, on November 3rd, yesterday, Joe Biden turned around and said, well, that's just not true. That's just garbage. It's not a true story. They aren't looking to pay $500,000 per illegal alien. And he says this, but here's the thing. The American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, says he's lying, that that's not true, that they are in discussions for up to $450,000. And here is where the play on words is coming from. Joe Biden said they're not going to pay $450,000 per illegal alien. He didn't say that the Biden administration isn't going to pay illegal aliens out of the pockets of U.S. taxpayers. He said it's not going to be for $500,000. So is it going to be $50,000? $100,000? He didn't answer that question. He went on from that question. He didn't answer that. And we have to understand that the ACLU says, and I'm going to quote, the ACLU said, and this is ACLU Executive Director Anthony D. Romero. And he said, quote, President Biden may not have been fully briefed about the actions of his very own Justice Department as it carefully deliberated and considered the crimes committed against thousands of families separated from their children as an intentional governmental policy. Really? So the ACLU is telling the American public that they are aware, if not involved, with the Justice Department to pay illegal aliens because President Donald Trump followed the law in the same manner that President Obama followed the law, a law that was in place since 1997, which would put it under the Clinton administration. And more troubling is, once again, the conversation from what Joe Biden says and what the Biden administration is doing are two entirely separate things. Now, again, the answer may be that Joe Biden is saying, no, we are not going to pay $450,000, $500,000 per illegal alien. No, we're not having that. We're talking about $100,000 or $50,000. I think that no matter what the number is, it's too much. For a nation that's at $29 trillion, looking at spending upwards of $31 trillion, if the plans, at the least, the plans that are being discussed by Democrats in Congress right now actually goes through the Biden budget, then we're looking at up to $31 trillion in debt. That's more than a quarter of the world's debt put together. That's more than what a quarter of the world makes in terms of GDP, gross domestic product, in a year. So this is continuing, and we're after the election. They know this. This was unpopular, but they didn't say no discussion is going on. They didn't say we would never pay these illegal aliens for breaking our law. Let's remember, they broke the law. And we followed the law in separating the children from their parents. And now we're supposed to pay them? This is a problem. We need to fight. This is something that we have to fight in America. We have to fight for our economy. We have to fight to spend our money properly and not waste it on these kind of ideas. Think about that. Even if it's only 1,000 illegal aliens, and it's way more than that. Think about the money that's being spent there, the tens of millions, the billions of dollars that we are speaking about. This is potentially enough money in a given year that we're talking about spending upwards of $15 billion. That is enough money to pay off every single eviction in the United States in full, with 12 to 14 million Americans currently facing evictions because of the COVID shutdowns, because of the continued lockdowns and restrictions that we have seen from 2020 all the way through 2021. We need to continue to fight. This issue hasn't gone away. The public interest may not be there, and many people may say, well, Biden said it's a garbage idea. But the ACLU is saying, no, it's not. They're saying the Justice Department knows it's not. So who's telling us the truth? Why are we getting distracted? Why are we being told, don't pay attention to this? And this is something that we have to pay attention to. This is something that we have to fight to get the proper, true answers. Just like we've been fighting on this channel, and you have seen us writing to our elected officials at the state and federal level, asking them how many Americans are in Afghanistan that want to come home. What are we doing about the Afghan refugees? What are we doing about our budget? Why are we paying illegal aliens for breaking our laws, which we know will result in more illegal aliens coming because we're paying them money? We've seen that in New York State, where New York State spent $2 billion to pay illegal aliens $15,000 apiece. Yes, New York State did that. We spent $2 billion of your taxpayer dollars to illegal aliens, people who broke our laws and continue to break the laws of this nation. We paid them $15,000 a piece, up to $2 billion. And New York State happens to be $8 billion in debt at this moment. It added to the tax burden of every single person in New York State and to an extent to the United States as well. We need to stay on top of these things because that didn't get fixed with the wins for Republicans and conservatives on November 2nd. We still need to stay on top of this. You need to be aware. But it doesn't stop there because we know there are problems with inflation. And we know that Joe Biden has been telling us over and over, Democrats have told us over and over, inflation isn't real. No, don't worry. The inflation is only temporary. It's not going to be here forever. It's going to go away. Don't worry, the economy is recovering. This is one of the greatest recoveries we have ever seen. We are coming back from COVID and we're coming back strong. This is the message that we are hearing from the Biden administration. This is what we are hearing from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and many, many other Democrats. It's not true. Looking at Yahoo Finance, November 3rd, we hear, and this is coming from the federal chairman himself. This is Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. And he said in a press conference, Americans have been feeling the impact of inflation. In fact, the 5.4% rate of inflation we have seen has actually caused all of the money that we have received from the Biden administration, all those stimulus checks that we received, those COVID-19 checks that we received, we're actually paying more in taxes because of the cost of inflation than the money we got from the government. We're spending more money than we got in checks. That money's has already been eaten away. And the Fed chair is telling us that don't worry, this is only temporary. It's not going to be that long. It's only going to continue into next year. That this is temporary. It's going to continue as we recover, as the economy gets better. We're going to see this continue. But don't worry, it's only temporary. Well, here's a news flash. All inflation is temporary. All economic issues are temporary. They constantly change. It's like the weather. It changes every day. Monetary policy, the national debt, money, trade with other countries, they're constantly changing. So then it's never just one thing. And eventually it always changes. Inflation will go up a lot or it goes up a little. The devaluing of our dollar, it will be a lot or a very little. Kind of like this year, we've seen it devalued massively. And in many other years, it didn't change that much. But we are seeing these things happen. And this is a way to make you think, well, it's over. November 2nd, we won the election. Democrats are going to change. Everything's going to change now. No, it's not. No, it's not. Inflation is still here. The policies that we are seeing that are being put in place by the Democratic Party, that are being put in by Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, remain in place at this moment, and you need to remain aware and on top of your elected officials telling them this is not what we want to see happening. We have to continue this because they're going to continue to tax you and to spend money like drunken sailors. Actually, they spend worse than drunken sailors do. And we need to put a stop to this. And that takes your attention. Now, we know for a fact, and it's been discussed a lot, that Terry McAuliffe, the candidate for the governor of Virginia, lost his race. It was a very big blow against the Democratic movement, the Democratic Party. They used everyone. They used Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. They had people flying in left and right, Stacey Abrams. They were using every tactic they could think of. They were race baiting. They were dropping Donald Trump's name. They were trying to scare people. And they were also justifying why Attorney General Garland is is attacking parents across this nation, using the force of the FBI to scare parents into being silent, as those parents are complaining about the critical race theory being taught to their children and the horrible policies that are being put in place with no foresight that are allowing sexual predators to take advantage of the laws to sexually assault minors in schools, as we've seen happen twice in Loudoun County. And the parents remembered that. And they remembered that Terry McAuliffe said, you don't need to be involved. Parents shouldn't be involved with their children and their children's education. Teachers know what your kids need, not parents. Parents shouldn't be involved in that, as they teach kids critical race theory, which essentially is telling your kids, the next generation of America, the next leaders of America, they are teaching them that if you're white, you are inherently a racist, and if you are not white, you are inherently a victim. A mentality that they are programming into these kids that will have an impact on their lives forever and will change the nature of our nation. And you need to be aware that didn't end on November 2nd. Critical race theory is still a problem. Attorney General Garland is still using the FBI against parents. They are still trying to silence you. That is a fact. It is still continuing to go on. And yes, there are some victories that happened, and you've heard about them from much of the right-leaning news media and independent news media, and they have spoken about the victories that we had, including here in New York State, where we see that several of the measures that were put in place to allow instantaneous registrations, 24-hour, same day registrations and elections, which would have changed the elections in New York State. That New York State, the people of New York State decided that they didn't want to have the redistricting to be left into the hands of the Democrats. That was rejected. We see that there were victories that happened. And I'm not going to dispute that. Yes, there were things that we got some victories on. We didn't hand over our government instantly to the Democratic, the progressive movement. We held on to America and we held on to some of our freedoms. But that doesn't mean it's over. The progressives are still trying to change our elections, and they are trying to change election law. And they did that in 2020. We have no reason to believe they won't do it again before 2022, because they still have the majority of power. And we have no reason to believe that they're not going to continue to use the idea of race, the race baiting tactics that they have used before in Georgia and across the nation, to try and incense people to vote their way based on fear. And in fact, we were told in New York City, there was, many people have followed this right now, and Eric Adams has just been elected as mayor in New York City. He's a Democrat. More importantly, he's a progressive. And Eric Adams just told us what we are going to see going forward. This is the new tactic that's going to be coming throughout the Democratic Party that they're going to be approaching you with. Their way of being able to maintain power, to try and continue to hold on to their ability to introduce more and more progressive ideas and more progressive laws, and put that against you, taking away your rights. This is what he had to say, and this is what the Democratic Party is going to be doing going forward.
I wanted people to know my story, being a dishwasher, having a learning disability, being arrested as a child, going to school at night, working in a mailroom. That was the story I wanted to send New Yorkers, and they felt me, and because of that, I'm now going to become the mayor of one of the greatest cities on the globe.
What lesson do you think Democrats around the country can take from your victory?
Practical is progressive. Practical is progressive. I am progressive in my policies. When you go online and see my 100 steps forward for New York City, you see how progressive I am. But we have to be practical. Let's not
See, that's the answer. We're going to be practical progressives now. Which is to say, in another way of looking at what he just said is, it is to be anything but practical. That the progressive ideology, the Democratic Socialists of America, the Green New Deal, the universal basic income, it's not practical. It isn't realistic. Defunding the police or reallocating the police funding or reimagining police, it's impractical. It isn't realistic. This isn't how you change in any positive manner the United States. And so now he's come up with a new slogan. It's going to be a practical progressive movement. That they're going to be effective because they want you to feel this. Do you hear what he said? He ran on how he wanted to make people feel. He wanted their emotions, not his policies, not his history, not his effectiveness. No. He wanted them to feel him. They wanted to feel his victimhood. He wanted them to feel how he was going to go forward, how he was going to be a progressive. But he doesn't deny he is a progressive through and through, that he has progressive ideologies. He wants to release people out on bail, but he wants to do it practically. He wants to spend money on illegal aliens, but he wants to do it practically. I don't understand how he thinks he's going to do that, and I'm afraid for New York City and New York State in watching him try to implement this, because he's correct. He says it, but he said it in a very careful way. He said, progressives aren't practical. They haven't been practical, and I would suggest that you can't be practical and a progressive. They don't work. The progressivism, which is socialism, which is communism, is impractical for a society that is positive and growing. The history of the world tells us it doesn't work. It just never works. It always fails. It is always autocratic. It is always less freedom and more oppressive every single time. But he just told you what's going to go forward? Practical progressivism. That's it. Progressive is practical. You're going to hear this over and over again, and they're going to talk to you about how you feel. They're going to talk to you about your emotions. They're not going to talk to you about the issues, or more importantly, the consequences of what they are doing. No one's talking about, they're talking about, we need the IRS as an example. We heard the Biden administration, we need 80,000 IRS agents to go after the rich. Because that's practical. We're going to get the rich to pay more because they're not paying enough, even though they pay over 70% of all taxes collected. That comes from the rich. But we want more from them. By the way, that 80,000 IRS agents, they're going to look into your bank account. You're not rich. The overwhelming majority of Americans, they're going to be looking into 75, maybe 85% of Americans' bank accounts, looking at every single transaction you did, whether it's a limit of $600 or $10,000, as we covered on this program before. It's the same thing. They're still going to get access to your bank account, your credit cards, your PayPal, your Venmo, whatever it is that you're using. And they're going to look at every single transaction, and they're going to squeeze out every single tax dollar they can. And God help us if there are more people like Lois Lerner that are still in the IRS after the Obama administration because they have a career in the IRS. They're going to be going through and looking at your politics as well. And they're going to punish you based on your politics as well. Practical progressivism. That's what they're going to be doing. And that should trouble us all. I know people are going to say, well, but it's all over. We've seen the change. Look at what happened in Virginia. And I'll point out to you and say, and look what happened in New Jersey. We were very close. Republicans and conservatives, even Democrats were voting against the Democratic Party. because it has failed, because it has left Americans in Afghanistan. It is bankrupting our country. It is making us weaker in the world, and we are having less influence. We're chasing down pipe dreams of the progressive ideology that is untenable, even as Eric Adams is admitting it himself that it is not practical. That has been the process we have been following for a couple of years now under the progressive ideology, and it fails. There's a reason why they say, go woke, get broke. And we see that as much as we've seen the nation change, we didn't really change as much as we think. Democrat Phil Murphy is now being called as reelected. He's in New Jersey. Mind you, he's still going to have some problems because there are people like Edward Dunn. Because for everything that didn't change, there are things that did change. And we should celebrate them. Edward Dunn, you've probably heard him a little bit today. This man is making history, political history. He's incredible, and he needs to be celebrated. This guy is great. I remember in 2013 when I ran for Congress, I had mentioned to many people, I had a strategy, and if I had, with $50,000, I could have won that election. It's all a matter of just using it properly. That was for a congressional race, 720,000 people, 8 counties, 2.5 hours north to south, about 2 hours east to west. It's a huge district. Could have won it with $50,000. I didn't win that race. I didn't get $50,000. But I can tell you, that would have been extraordinary. But Mr. Edward Durr has done something far greater than what I think anyone in politics has ever done. This man, Mr. Edward Durr, who was a truck driver, decided he was upset. He was pissed off because New Jersey said he could not get a concealed carry license to protect himself, to protect his vehicle, and to exercise his Second Amendment rights. And because of that, he decided he was going to run for the New Jersey State Senate against the New Jersey State Senate president. He raised $10,000. To be exact, $10,460. Which you may say, well, that seems like a lot of money. This is a race that has spent hundreds of thousands, literally millions of dollars have gone into races for this exact same race to beat the New Jersey State Senate president. Hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars have been used to try and beat him. And this truck driver, Edward Durr, spent a grand total expenditures $153.33. $153. You know what? I love this guy. It's incredible. Even Newsweek had to admit and talk about this. You know what he spent the money on? You're going to love this because we know what he spent the money on. He spent the money on $66. Almost all of it was spent. $66 out of $153 was spent at Dunkin' Donuts getting coffee and donuts. He didn't spend $10,000. He didn't spend $5,000. He didn't even spend $1,500. He spent $153 at Dunkin' Donuts. Edward Durr is the man. This is political history here. And he is winning by 2,000 votes. By the way, you probably didn't know that he was winning by 2,000 votes. Because if you look at stories, let me go back to this, and this is from Newsweek. And Newsweek, even though he's leading by 2,000 votes, even though they should call this race, it is a lead that is very strong. This is something that is not expected to be turned around. Edward Durr is expected to win, but the news media will not call it for him. Even though it's 2,000 votes, which is more than just a little bit, they will not call this race. They should call it. If it was for the state senator, then they would have called it. But because it's Edward Durr and he spent $153, they will not call this yet. They will not give him his victory that he should have. And the victory that is minute by minute becoming more of an irrefutable reality. And you know what? I hope Edward Durr wins, because he did this strictly to make a point. It's one of the reasons why people sometimes run for elections. Not necessarily to win sometimes. Sometimes it's to make the point that things have to change, that there is an accountability to these elected officials. And God help us, he didn't just make the point, he's winning the election. Because we need that change. That's the fight that we need to continue to have. That's the fight that we need to continue to go on. Because this isn't over, folks. We've got the Supreme Court is going to be looking at the New York SAFE Act. They're going to be looking at the very unconstitutional laws that were imposed by Governor Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, the Democratic-held Assembly, the State Senate, and the executive office, the governor, that have restricted and stripped away the ability of normal Americans to protect themselves at the very same time that they are trying to strip away our police, which has resulted in more people dying and being harmed. We got to be aware of this, and we have to watch out for the news media, because they didn't change after November 2nd. The news media is doing the same things. Look at the Kyle Rittenhouse trials. And look what's going on there. They're fanning the flames of the the division that is there in America, that people are already saying that they want to have riots if Kyle Rittenhouse isn't convicted. Same thing that they did with the trial with the George Floyd trial, where we saw that, who was it? It was Representative Maxine Waters came out and said, we have to have a charge that didn't even exist. And he has to be found guilty of that charge that didn't even exist. Otherwise, there's going to be riots. And what happened that same day? There were riots. We covered it on this program. You can see the video of her saying that and the consequence. Yes. And they're doing that now. The same BLM, the same Antifa, the same progressives that are trying to manipulate emotions, exactly what Eric Adams did, the same thing that he is advising Democrats to do going forward for the midterms in 2022, is manipulating emotions. They're doing that with the Kyle Rittenhouse proceedings. And they're trying to distract you. They're trying to make this about, instead of dealing with the charges and the evidence as it is being presented, which shows that Kyle Rittenhouse did defend himself as three individuals tried to assault him, possibly tried to kill him, and he defended his life. And the evidence is pointing to that. The case is getting bigger and stronger per day that Kyle Rittenhouse will be innocent. And to change the attention and to keep you emotionally attached to this, to keep people angry, and to make sure that there will be riots, we're seeing that the news media is now attacking the judge in this case. They are now trying to make this about what the judge has done. And the judge understands this, because he makes the acknowledgement. And the judge, Judge Schroeder, says, quote, anything that undermines public confidence in what happens here is very important. It's important for this town. It's important for the country to have people have confidence in the results of this trial. Whatever it is, and I don't care what it is, but people have to be confident. And see, that's what they're attacking. Because the news media didn't change after the November 2nd election. We see they're using the same tactics. They were attacking Kyle Rittenhouse. The evidence isn't matching up to their expectations. They're not going to win the case based on that. So now they're going to go after the judge. They're going to go after the process. They're trying to get your emotions riled up, and they know that people will riot because of that. In fact, they're counting on BLM and Antifa doing that so that they can get more ratings, so that they can maintain more control. So you will be afraid because there are fewer police and you don't have the right to have the Second Amendment to protect yourself. And when you do try and protect yourself with the Second Amendment, now you have to fear that the government is going to come after you and to throw you in jail for saving your own life. Just like they're more than willing to use the FBI to go after parents for trying to be involved in their children's lives and not letting the government raise their children. This is why we have to stay on top of this. And I'm not kidding about the increase in violence here, folks, because we know. I'll give you an example. New York City, 505 people were shot in the year-to-date numbers. 505 people. That is an increase over 2019. Forget about 2020 with the pandemic. It's an increase versus 2019. New York Times released this. They published this on May 14th. And the numbers have not gone down. They have gone higher. Crime is worse. More people have been shot. New York, Baltimore, look across the country in all the 22 cities that defunded or reimagined or reallocated the funding for the police. Call it however you'd like to, whichever way sounds better to you. The result was the same thing. More crime, more violence, and it's directly related to what the progressive policies were. Because as Eric Adams said, progressivism isn't practical. It's emotional. It has nothing to do with being practical. It has everything to do with being emotional. And that's why you see it fail over and over again. But this isn't the only thing that we have to be very diligent on and that we have to impress upon our elected officials. Remember, there are still people protesting right now. 9,000 New York City workers protesting the vaccine mandates, the pandemic medication requirements that are being imposed by the appointed governor, Kathy Hochul, by Governor Bill de Blasio. That is unconstitutional. That violates people's religious rights, their freedom to choose, your personal investment, your personal choice about your health care is now being usurped by the government at the city and state and federal level. And I want you to think about this. 9,000 people protested. 9,000 people went out of their way to protest. And the news media has constantly said, well, no, this is a fringe group of people. It's not real. In my community, in the southern tier of New York, over 1,000 people have come out into 4 different protests. And these were doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals who are protesting, saying they want to work, but they don't want the pandemic medication and they don't want the requirement, whether for religious or the Hippocratic Oath or other reasons. And the government saying they have more control over your health care than you do. It's the government usurping your power. And you gotta love it, because here it is, CNN, and they're talking down this issue. It's not a big deal. It's less than 3% of the municipal workforce. It's less than 3%. It's a minor number. And 85% of the police have at least one shot. 85% of police will not be affected. Did you know there's 36,000 New York City police officers? Give or take the 600 that were fired, removed, reallocated because of the defunding the police effort in 2020 that led to an increase in crime. Let me say it again. In 2020, Mayor Bill de Blasio reallocated, revisioned the New York City Police Department, and 600 detectives were removed. 600. Okay? Not 36. There's 36,000 police officers. 600, less than 1,000, were taken off the job, and crime has skyrocketed. Skyrocketed. It's huge. And you have to understand, now we're talking about 3,000, maybe 4,000 police officers will no longer be there. CNN saying 85% are perfectly fine. 85% are going to be on the job every day. Yeah, but 4,000 won't. And if we had a spike of 20-30%, an increase in violence and death of 20-30% off of 600 officers being removed, what happens when 4,000 don't show up? How safe will you be then? See, that's what the media wants to do. This is what we have to fight going forward. This is why we have to pay attention. Because they're mixing the numbers. Well, it's only 85% that, don't worry, 85% of cops are going to be there. But that means that 15% won't. That means that more than 4,000 police officers will not be there. So it's going to take longer for the police to come and to protect you, to take care of you, to try and resolve your issue, and to stop crimes, and to arrest people who are committing crimes. There's going to be fewer of them. They're going to have to work harder. They're going to have to work longer, and it's going to delay their ability to provide you services. Same thing with our doctors. Our doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals, there are less of them. That means hospitals are doing less. They're not able to do all the surgeries they were doing before. They can't take care of people like they were before. I've talked to several elected officials. I know that nursing homes are not able to take in people and help them like they were before. They don't have the staff, and the staff that are left are overworked because we lost 33,000 doctors and nurses and healthcare workers that are not being replaced. This is why we have to stay on top of this. I'm happy we had our victories on November 2nd. It doesn't change the fight for America. We are not nearly done. They're going to change tactics. The goal up to this day, up to November 2nd, has been, well, it's President Trump. You're like President Trump. You're a Trumpist. There's Trumpisms. You're using Trumpisms. Trump, Trump, Trump. President Trump isn't in the Oval Office. Joe Biden's in the Oval Office. Joe Biden is the one making decisions that are leaving Americans abandoned in Afghanistan. Joe Biden is looking to increase taxes. Joe Biden is trying to hire IRS agents to watch and snoop into your financial privacy. Joe Biden is the one who's trying to use your tax dollars to pay illegal aliens, people who broke our laws. And now they've suddenly come up with this idea. Democrats have finally realized people don't care about blaming President Trump. One of them, this is quoted from the article, and this is from, again, the New York Magazine. An individual they asked for, quote, "I don't know what Terry McAuliffe's message is. I'm not Donald Trump, and the guy that I'm going against is Donald Trump. Donald Trump wasn't on the ballot. Donald Trump isn't running for your local election." But that's what they realize now. And you know what? Going on with the quote, it goes, "It's clear that the blueprint of talking about Donald Trump all the time when he's not in office is not a winning message, particularly in a state that Joe Biden won by 10 points. So this is the change. Democrats are aware. They know. They can't just say President Trump and everyone's going to stop. Mind you, the news media is not going to stop doing that. They're going to continue. Looking from the BBC, when they're talking, they're going to switch it though. It's not just Trump. They're going to be talking about the insurrection. Here it is from the BBC. It turns out American voters either have a short memory or they don't hold the Republican Party itself responsible for the January violence, the January riots. Well, of course we shouldn't hold the Republican Party. It wasn't a Republican Party event. It wasn't something that was suggested by the Republican Party. These were individuals. Some of them were members of Antifa and BLM. Some of them, as we are learning, were members of the FBI and were were encouraged to be there by the FBI, as we are learning from documents and from witnesses on stands, as we are seeing the committee go through its investigation. The BBC goes on to say, "Instead, politics in the United States has been tracking a familiar pattern. A new president is elected with congressional majorities. After early popularity, his attempt to pass a political agenda runs into political headwinds. The out-of-power party, stung by recent defeat and angered by the opponents' governing actions, become unified in their opposition, while the in-power party struggles with internal divisions. Their voters grow frustrated over the lack of immediate success, and their enthusiasm ebbs. Yes, that's kind of what happens in America because we're not a parliamentary system. We're not like Italy or the United Kingdom or Australia. We have more freedoms. We get to make choices, and sometimes those choices change. But we have to remember that there is more to this than just Trump. There's more to this than saying, we won the election. We've won. We haven't won. The fight continues, and your attention is necessary. We're going to stay on this. We've been doing this for 15 years, and we are not going to give up on you. We are not going to give up on America. We are going to hold elected officials accountable, whether they're Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, or Democrats and progressives. We're going to stay on top of all of them. We're going to ask them questions like we ask of New York 19's Congressman Antonio Delgado. Where are the American citizens in Afghanistan? How many are over there? What are you doing to get them back home safely now? It is a question he has refused to answer for 60 days, and we will not give up asking that question, Congressman. And we have asked that of many members of Congress, and we will continue to do so. We have asked members of Congress and the state of New York about the unvetted Afghan refugees. Who's coming here? How many people are coming here? Have they been vetted? Which we know the answer is they couldn't have been. It takes 2 years. They've been here for 2 months. They haven't been vetted. When are they coming into our communities? Who is paying for this? And are we sure that our public will be safe with these individuals? Because so far evidence says that's not exactly true. We are making the case for these issues and so much more, and we will continue to follow it. And if you have followed us all the way through this, almost for an hour here, we hope that you're going to be on top of these things too, that you will speak to your elected officials, that you will tell us ideas and things that you think are important, that you will join us every Sunday in our live stream at 2:30 p.m. because many politicians, on November 2nd, I was talking to many Democrats. I was talking to many Republicans, conservatives, and libertarians. A lot of elected officials watch this program just like you do. They pay attention and they're looking for your comments. They're listening to when you make phone calls and what you are saying in your tweets while the show is on. They're paying attention. Make sure you're involved too. And going forward, we're going to be talking about many other issues because America is worth fighting for. We're the greatest nation in the world. I truly believe that, and I will never stop fighting for this nation. And I hope you'll join us in that process. But until the next time, we want to thank you. We hope to see you Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from anywhere in the world. And please, be well.